The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. Of course, I'm your Commander-in-Chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Few topics to get to tonight. I'm going to continue with the command core. We've knocked down the offensive line. We've knocked down the running back position. Tonight, we're going to knock down the defensive line. Before we get to that, I want to talk about Terry McLaurin's contractual situation. I read an article written by Joel Corey for CBS Sports. He does a phenomenal job talking contracts, former NFL agent that does a really good job breaking things down and making it very understandable for the fan, right? These contract negotiations are tough. There's a lot of factors that have to be taken into consideration. And, you know, there's been a lot of scuttlebutt amongst Commanders fans as to what the number for Terry looks like, how much he should be paid, et cetera, et cetera. There are certain factors, too, that, you know, you don't necessarily put into the equation that you should. I know some fans leave certain things out that I think is very important. And we'll get to some of those things. I'll discuss some of those things when we look at some of the excerpts from that particular article, which I've trimmed it down and taken the best parts that I think are the most impactful from that article. And we're going to go over that to try to get closer to what we think the number really is for Terry and his camp when it's all said and done. Because a lot of numbers have been thrown out there. You know, I think there's some outlandish numbers that I've heard people saying. Like even last night, we were on the Commanders King stream, and I think Ed had or Rico, one of them said that someone said something about $37 million, and I'm like, there's just no way that the number's that high. I don't even think Terry's camp would even propose a number that high. I mean, Justin Jefferson's getting 36. There's no way in hell that Terry and his camp thinks that they're getting more than Justin Jefferson, which, again, I know how these negotiations work. You ask for a number that's a lot higher than what you actually want because you expect the other side to rebuff that and counter with something, and then you hope somehow to meet in the middle. But that's just an outlandish number, right? We've got to be real about the situation. So that's what this discussion about Terry's contract is about tonight. But before we get to that, there was a brand new episode of the Commander's Log. And I had suggested that, man, it's been a while. Like, what is going on? It feels like it's been an eternity since we've gotten an episode of the Commander's Log. And lo and behold, we got one today. It was very brief. It was 19 minutes, roughly. Just a shade over 19 minutes. It really didn't have anything to do with the team on the field per se, more so the things surrounding it. And it just continues to hammer home the point of the health of this organization and, you know, just in how good a shape we are in and where we've come from and what we've dealt with, and to see the things that now we discuss, like, isn't it refreshing to be having a conversation about getting the stadium back to RFK and legitimately knowing that that's going to take place? Isn't it refreshing to talk about, you know, the Terry contract situation? And we would hope that this would already be done, honestly, you know, but it's refreshing to be talking about things that have to do with actual football operations and not things that have to do with off the field and nothing to do with football. And this was another reminder of that. This episode of the Commander's Log was a reminder of that. It centered around going back to RFK. It centered around Dan Quinn's trip back to Salisbury University, where he gave a speech to the graduating class. And it centered around think there was one more thing in between the two items that I just brought up. Like having the players back in the building, you know, getting everybody back working out, that sort of thing. Again, it wasn't a lot to do with the players themselves. It was more about the things going around the organization right now. I have a feeling we're going to get something to do with the uniforms in the next one. Hopefully, a Terry extension in the next one as well. Wrap all those things up, and then also get like going to training camp. Maybe they'll separate those two and create a single video or episode of the Commander's Log for just the uniforms and Terry's extension. That seems probably more likely than them trying to then transition straight into the beginning of training camp. Although I would be good with them just waiting and giving us a longer episode than what they did this time, which was just 19 minutes. I mean, it's better than nothing, right? But it felt like as soon as I turned it on, it was over. They've spoiled me. My wife was like, 19 minutes? What happened to the 45? Like, you don't get those as often. We got spoiled for a little while there. They were making movies. And you know, that team last year gave them the opportunity to make movies. This is now you're in the lean part of the year, not as much to talk about. And so I felt like they could have given us a lot of OTA stuff. I'm pretty sure they had been, you know, recording the phase 1, 2, and 3. I thought they could have thrown some of that stuff in there. Oh yeah, they had like a outing with the players at a like a lunch. It's almost like a luncheon with Josh Harris's wife, and like a high school team was there. And we remember seeing like little clips of them planking, and Jalen Lane and a high schooler were like the last two left, and the high schooler ended up winning. And so they all were talking about, you know, that experience and how this was a true brotherhood. A lot of the rookies spoke. Kane Madrano, Jalen Lane, Josh Connolly Jr. were the main ones that spoke. So it was, again, a quick in and out episode. It was enough to scratch the itch, but I'll be itching soon, very, very soon. And I want some on the field stuff next time, if you don't mind. So it would be nice. I feel like I'm being a spoiled brat right now. Like, I feel like, you know, it doesn't matter at this point. It's never going to be enough. That's not true if that's how I'm coming off right now. But they spoiled me. Like, I am going to say that. They did spoil me. And so I do want more. But I'll take what I can get. So if you haven't watched that yet, 19 minutes and like 2 seconds. So really quick episode, but it just reinforces that we've got a good thing going here. And I think the biggest takeaway for me was that DQ is the ultimate leader. And I will be absolutely shocked if with his leadership and tutelage, we don't win 2 to 3 Super Bowls. I'll be shocked. If we continue to assemble the right pieces and Jaden Daniels is what we all think he is, I'll be shocked if DQ doesn't add a couple more trophies, Lombardis to the case. I'll be shocked. His leadership style and the way that he conducts himself, and that speech he gave, excellent. I mean, how do you not leave that graduation and say, I'm ready to go tackle the world, right? I'm ready to go get after it. So yeah, it was a solid episode, but we're in great hands. That's what I left that episode saying. Man, we're in great shape. So Terry is this topic is going to start becoming one that is going to circulate. There's going to be a lot of different. I'm pretty sure you've seen them if you've been looking for them. I'm not looking for any of them, but I'm pretty sure there have been a number of best trade, you know, landing destinations for Terry McLaurin, et cetera, et cetera. you'll start to see those articles. They're going to pop up, and it's not just Terry, right? They've happened for TJ Watt, right? And any other player that's disgruntled and hasn't gotten a contract, right, yet. All of those things have popped up for them as well. But ultimately, TJ Watt's not going anywhere. Ultimately, Terry McLaurin's not going anywhere. Really, the real question becomes, what does a deal for those players look like? And I could care less about TJ Watt, right? I'm more concerned with Terry McLaurin. But what does a deal for Terry McLaurin look like? And when is it going to be reached? I've been adamant that the deal is coming within the next week or two. So I'm not stressed about that. But the number is something that I think a lot of people are interested to see what it ends up being. I've seen people all over the map. You got the people that have lost their damn minds, who are probably a taco short of a combination plate, that are talking 22, 23. The man's already making that kind of money. Why would he want to sign a deal that is of that ilk? That doesn't make any sense. And then you've got people saying, well, he should be rated in that $28 million, $29 million range. That's crazy, right? Because, and this article will give you a better perspective if that's the way you're thinking about it, right? So let's get to this article that I found very fascinating regarding Terry McLaurin and what the market for him is more likely than not going to be, right? So this, again, is an excerpt. These are excerpts. I cut and paste a few paragraphs from an article written by Joel Corey of CBS Sports, former NFL agent who has been with CBS Sports probably now for 5-6 years and does a tremendous job covering the NFL, but more specifically in his wheelhouse, talking about NFL contracts from both the player perspective / agent perspective and then the team perspective, right? And how his experience has led him to be able to have these types of conversations that allow you as a fan into the discussions that are taking place when it comes to these contracts, right? He does a tremendous job of laying this stuff out. So here's the article, and I'll stop periodically when something is said that I want to add to or talk about, but we'll get through all of this. So the first excerpt says, once again, Joel Corey, CBS Sports article written about the Terry McLaurin deal and what it looks like. Getting a deal done is going to require the Commanders acknowledging that McLaurin is a number one wide receiver and should be paid accordingly. McLaurin is the primary receiving threat on the Commanders. He led the Commanders with 117 targets in 2024. I feel like that's without saying, but I've seen some, people out there. I'm trying not to call names because calling names is not necessary and it's not nice, especially when some of these people are family members. So I need to behave myself. But anybody that thinks that Terry, we've had this conversation years ago, right? Even when Chris Cooley disagreed and said that McLaurin wasn't a number one receiver, I thought that was bullshit. And I called bullshit then. Terry McLaurin is a number one wide receiver. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. He's established that. That's not a conversation. They know that. That's not something that he has to have his agent express to them. They understand that Terry McLaurin is a number one wide receiver in this league. That said, the Commanders don't have another wide receiver who can fill McLaurin's shoes. Amen, right? Like yesterday on the Commanders Kings show, I had thrown out this cockamamie hypothetical where we trade McLaurin, whether it's 2 1s, a 1, the problem is that you leave a massive void on this roster if that were to occur, right? Because you don't have anyone else that can do the things that Terry McLaurin can do, right? Deebo Samuel, who was acquired from the San Francisco 49ers in March for a 2025 fifth-round pick, hasn't been extremely productive since the 2021 season when he earned first-team All-Pro honors. Just like McLaurin, 2025 is a contract year for Samuel, right? We know what Deebo is at this point, or what we hope he's going to be, but it's not like we don't expect him to be Terry McLaurin. If he plays to that level, great. That's going to make our offense that much more unstoppable. But that's not the expectation, right? T. Higgins sets the market for number 2 wide receiver. This is where it gets really interesting. After being designated as a franchise player by the Cincinnati Bengals for a second straight year, Higgins signed a 4-year, $115 million contract, averaging $28.75 million per year in March. That deal is worth up to $121.8 million through incentives. Higgins eclipsed the 3-year, $84.75 million extension, averaging $28.25 million per year for Jalen Waddle received from the Dolphins during the 2024 offseason to set the pay scale for the number 2 wide receiver. So the reason why this particular excerpt is, to me, important is that it establishes what the premier number 2 receiver is getting paid. And that's $28.75 million. So if you're Terry McLaurin, the conversation doesn't start at 28.75, right? Because that's what number 2 receivers are getting paid. You're a number 1 wide receiver. So for anybody out there that's like, well, Terry should be getting 26 or 27 or $28 million. This right here debunks that theory right there. Like $28.75 million is the highest paid number 2 receiver in the league. All right. That's number 2 wide receiver money. When people say, oh, Smitty took less in Philadelphia, Smitty got number 2 wide receiver money. And when he got it, it was right around where the number 2 wide receivers were getting paid. He's not a number 1 wide receiver in this league. So you can't compare with other guys. Oh, Smitty took less. Smitty's not a number 1 wide receiver. So he's not in this conversation. So you can't start the conversation with that first number being a 2 if you're talking about Terry Miller. Let's continue. Jamar Chase sets the bar for wide receiver compensation. He became the league's highest paid non-quarterback with the 4-year, $161 million extension, averaging $40.25 million per year he signed. At the same time, Higgins, his Bengals teammate, took pay for number 2 wide receivers to new heights. So both of them set the bar at their respective spots, right? Higgins being a number 2 receiver and Jamar Chase being a number 1. They both set a new bar for their particular roles on their team as a number 1 and a number 2 wide receiver. Chase's deal has $109.8 million of guarantees, whereas $73.9 million was fully guaranteed at signing. Okay. So the highest paid wide receiver in the league is $40 million. Terry's not approaching that. He's not even coming close to that. And let's talk about why, right? There's a pretty significant gap between Chase and the rest of the wide receiver market. And I didn't think he would get that kind of money, right? When I saw Justin Jefferson reset the market at 36, I just thought, okay, Jamar Chase is going to be 36 point something or 37, right? Maybe even 38. But to be a full 4 million clear of the next closest receiver was crazy to me, right? Justin Jefferson was the previous wide receiver standard, right? The Minnesota Vikings gave Justin Jefferson a 4-year, $140 million extension, averaging $35 million per year in June of 2024. So the number was 35. I misspoke. I thought it was 36. Jefferson's contract has $110 million in guarantees, of which $88.743 million was fully guaranteed at signing. So the thing to take into consideration here is Jefferson's contract has more guaranteed money, even though it's less on average. And there was more guaranteed money at signing for Justin Jefferson, despite the number for Jamar Chase being higher. McLaurin is expecting some sort of trickle-down effect from Chase's contract where he bridges this gap will likely be a deal breaker for the Commanders, right? Clearly, if McLaurin looks at what Jamar Chase did and says, okay, Justin Jefferson got 35, Jamar's got 40, I should get 37. That's insanity. If I were them, I wouldn't even do that, right? And I seriously doubt, I hope his agent isn't doing that, because then I understand why there's a stalemate. Like, that's insane. Like, if they started the conversation there just to, you know, start high and then, you know, work their way down to something, you know, more reasonable. Okay, yeah, I get that. Right. But if they're serious about that, which we don't know, that's insanity, right? CeeDee Lamb is the third wide receiver in the salary hierarchy. He signed a 4-year, $136 million extension, averaging $34 million per year with the Dallas Cowboys in August during the latter part of the preseason. There are $100 million in guarantees, which $67 million was fully guaranteed at signing. At the time, both marks were second most ever in a wide receiver contract. So he fell in line behind Justin Jefferson. Terry McLaurin is not better than CeeDee Lamb. So again, he should not be exceeding him in the amount of pay, right? So let's continue. I always have said that with the Terry situation, DK Metcalf's extension with the Steelers messed everything up. Because if DK would have went to Pittsburgh and gotten a extension paying him $31 million per year on average, I think Terry's deal would have gotten done already. But because he got one that was paying him $33 million, Terry's like, well, I'm better. And I don't blame Terry and his agent if they're like, we're better than DK. And not only is Terry better than DK Metcalf, he's more important to this organization than DK Metcalf was to his previous organization, which is why they felt the need to trade him. And he's more important to the fabric of what we do than he is, than DK Metcalf is to the Steelers, because he just got there. Despite being 3 years younger, and that is something you have to factor in, right? So Joel Corey continues. A potentially important data point to McLaurin is the 4-year extension averaging nearly $33 million per year DK Metcalf received from the Pittsburgh Steelers in connection with his March trade from the Seattle Seahawks shortly before Chase signed. Metcalf is a part of the 2019 draft class, just like McLaurin. His contract is slightly backloaded. The first 3 years average just under $32.175 million per year, since there is a $35.5 million salary in 2029, the last year of Metcalf's contract. The deal has $80 million in guarantees, where $60 million was fully guaranteed at signing. The last $20 million of guarantees in 2027 are for injury only. Metcalf is only the third veteran player for the Steelers to ever receive fully guaranteed money in the second contract year, joining edge rusher TJ Watt and safety Minkah Fitzpatrick, who was just traded to the Dolphins. The Steelers didn't start giving out traditional salary guarantees in veteran contracts until 2021 with TJ Watt. Metcalf is about 2 years younger than McLaurin, and he will be 28 in December. McLaurin has been the more productive receiver than Metcalf of late. Metcalf has rare traits. Metcalf is a physical freak of nature for a receiver. He's listed at 6'4", weighs 230 pounds, and has great speed, all of which we are fully aware of. The Commanders designating, so this is where I think if you're a Commanders fan, this is where you have to really pay attention, because I think this is where you find out what the number probably is going to be, somewhere in the neighborhood of. The Commanders designating McLaurin as a franchise player in 2026, if he plays out his contract, won't be cheap. It will cost $30.2 million at a minimum, with the way the 120% of prior year's salary provision works with the franchise tags. The 20% increase is primarily based on the player's salary cap number from the previous year. McLaurin's franchise tag would be $30.45 million if he is named to the 2025 Pro Bowl on the original ballot, because his $250,000 Pro Bowl incentive would be classified as likely to be earned and added in after calculating the increase. Expect McLaurin's camp to factor the franchise tag amount into their negotiation equation. So this essentially tells you where the number starts for Terry McLaurin. Like, if I'm his agent, there's no reason for Terry McLaurin to take a deal that is less than $30.45 million per year. And if you're the Commanders and you want to be petty, you can say, okay, the number's 30.2. You haven't made the Pro Bowl yet in 2025. But the franchise tag number for next year is more likely than not going to be 30.2 million for Terry McLaurin. If he were to play out this year without a contract, next year they slap the franchise tag on him. This is what the number looks like. So from a per year standpoint, I need to be making 30.2. If I'm his camp, $30.45 million per year. That's at the bare minimum. That's at the bare minimum. So you're probably looking at a 3-year with this money, 3 years, 91 and some change, right? 91.25 or something like that. That's not what they're looking for, but that's where it starts, right? One way to try to help resolve the stalemate between McLaurin and the Commanders could be to look at the contracts of 6 receivers named first or second team All-Pro last year. Chase and Jefferson, as well as Amon-Ra St. Brown, were on the first team. Brown signed a 4-year, $120 million extension, averaging $30,002,500 per year with the Detroit Lions in April of 2024. The deal has $77 million in guarantees, of which $34.666 million was fully guaranteed at signing. A.J. Brown joined Lamb and McLaurin as the second team wide receivers. He received a 3-year, $96 million extension, averaging $32 million per year from the Philadelphia Eagles in April of 2024. Brown's contract has $84 million in guarantees, where $51 million was fully guaranteed at signing. Collectively, these 6 receivers are signed to extensions with $722.61 million of new money for 22 new contract years to average $32.845 $909 million per year. The oldest of these receivers at signing, excluding McLaurin, was Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown. He turned 27 a couple of months after he got his deal. The other 4 were either 25 or close to being 25 when they signed. Again, age being a factor. Another data point that could be useful in adjusting McLaurin's existing contract for salary cap inflation, the salary cap has increased by 34.1% since McLaurin signed in 2022. His deal is a little less than $31.125 million per year when factoring in salary cap growth. Another number, if I'm McLaurin's camp, that I'm sitting at and saying, just off of principle of where we are right now, adding in and factoring in inflation, the number now goes from 30.45 to 31.125 million per year, which now puts you in that $93.3 million range, right? Taking everything into consideration, it's hard to envision a realistic scenario where McLaurin accepts less than Brandon Ayuk's $30 million per year in an extension, even though there is an age difference between the two. Ayuk signed a 4-year, $120 million extension with the 49ers containing $76 million in guarantees. Out of the $76 million, $45 was fully guaranteed. Ayuk was 26 when he signed. Okay. So what I've gathered from this is, if you look at the money for the Terry deal that he's currently under, with inflation being factored in, it's 31.125. If I'm his agent, I think what Joel Corey did here with the averaging the 6 receivers in that were all pros, which Terry was a second team all pro, along with CeeDee Lamb and AJ Brown. You factor in those 6 guys and you average it out, it's $32.8 million. And I think you just bump it up to 33 if I'm Terry's agent, which I think a lot of us has said the number probably is 33 because of DK Metcalf. I think you bump it up because of what Terry's worth is to this franchise. It's close to 33 million at the 32.8 million range. If I'm Terry, I want to be paid higher than AJ Brown because his deal was consummated 2 years ago, right? 2024. I think it was what didn't they say that his deal was? Felt like his deal was like 2 years ago. It might have been so early in the 2024 window. Yeah, April of 2024. So AJ Brown signed a deal over a year ago, we're talking a year and a half ago. April is the 4th month. We're in the 7th month. So you're almost going close to a year and a half ago, right? You want more money than AJ Brown. He's getting 32 a year, right? And what was it? 3 years, 96. DK signs 3-year, or I think his was a 4-year extension at roughly 33 million. The average of the 6 all-pro receivers is 32.8. You factor in Terry's worth to this organization. If you're serious about really installing this culture and sustaining it, you have to take care of Terry McLaurin. It's not optional. This is the guy that you have even said out of your own mouth, if you're Dan Quinn and Adam Peters, that he's done everything the right way. He's the consummate professional. These are your words, not mine. As fans, we know what Terry's worth is. You can't put a price on what Terry McLaurin has meant to this organization. They understand that. They know. Not to mention, he's a damn good football player. To me, if I'm Terry's camp, the number starts at 31, just a shade over 31 million, and I'm not taking anything less than 33 million. If I'm the Commanders, I'm trying to get as close to 30 million as I can. Your number is 30. Their number should be 30. If I'm them, it's 35, 34, 35. Let them talk you down to 33 and make them feel like they won something. But maybe they meet in the middle and it ends up being 32 and some change. I feel like as long as it's more than AJ Brown's deal, you feel good. But because AJ Brown and DK Metcalf were both in that 2019 draft class. The problem here, and it always goes back to, is age. Terry's about to turn 30 years old. The other two guys are, DK just turned 27, or he's about to turn 28 in December, I think the article said. And everybody, AJ's 25, and the rest of those guys were 25 when they signed their deals. Jamar Chase, 24, about to turn 25. Justin Jefferson, same deal. So that is what makes this an interesting situation. But when it's all said and done, I think the number for Terry is ultimately in that $33 million range. I wouldn't be shocked if it's 32 and some change, right? That number, that 32.8 number, sounds good. Again, if I'm Terry's agent, I want that number to get to 33, just off of the strength of what Terry means to this organization. And I think it's going to get done, right? But what I can assure you is that number for Terry isn't going to be less than 30. And I'll take it a step further. I don't think it's going to be less than 31. Now, it might be 31.25 or 31.5, but I don't think that number is less than $31 million. I think it's closer to 33 because I think we're getting close to that 3-year, $100 million, because that looks good. 3 years, $100 million, right? That looks the part. So that's the number that I'm thinking. And I think if we go back to the article really quick and start to look at some of the guaranteed money, Chase's deal, I'm just bust out the calculator real quick. Chase's deal had $109 million, of which 7, let's call it 74, of which 74 of it was fully guaranteed. So of 161 million, see, 161 million times, see how much this is. See, let's say 65. So let's go with 70 then. 161 times 0.7. So it's not quite there. 161 times 0.68. So he got about roughly 68% of his contract was guaranteed, right? So let's see what Justin Jefferson's, he got slightly, I think, more in guarantees. So for 140, his might be 70 times 0.7. Shit, it's even higher than that. Because he got what, 110? Sheesh. All right. So 140 times 75. I'm thinking it's got to be 75%. No, sheesh. More than that. It might be 80% of this thing that's fully guaranteed. Yikes. So it's just a shade under 80%. 140, we'll call it 79%. Call it 79%. Let's see. Yeah, 79. Roughly 79% of Justin Jefferson's contract is fully guaranteed. So he actually made out better than Jamar Chase when it's all said and done, even though Chase's deal looks like it's more money. Justin Jefferson actually is going to walk away with more money than Jamar Chase when it's all said and done. So CeeDee Lamb has 136 million, and I'm going to say 68%. Nope. Let's go to 72%. 136 times 72. Nope. 136, maybe 75. 75. What did he get? 100, right? So it's going to be 74 is my guess. 136 times 74%. Yeah. See, he got 74. So if we're just going off of what these guys have gotten, Jamar Chase was in the, what Jamar Chase was, how much did he get in guarantees? Jamar Chase's was 161 and he got 109. So he got 68%. Justin Jefferson got 79% and CeeDee Lamb got 74%. So let's just say Terry gets 72% fully guaranteed. If we do the math, you can do the quick math. If he's getting $100 million contract, 72% would be $72 million fully guaranteed, right? Of which my guess would be 51 of it might be fully guaranteed at signing or something to that effect, right? 44, 51, something like that. So that's what it feels like. 3 years, 100.5 million dollars, 72 of it fully guaranteed. Let's just give a nice round 50 fully guaranteed at signing, something to that effect. Half of it is fully guaranteed at signing. I feel like that could get the deal done. So that's kind of, I thought this was an interesting article written by Joel Corey because he's been in these types of negotiations. He knows what agents are using as leverage, what are some of their data points and where they're starting the conversation at. And I expect it to get done within the next week to a week and a half, right? And I expect it to look something along those lines, right? So any craziness you hear, 37, that's ridiculous. That's preposterous. There's no way. There's no way. And I don't think Terry's asking for that kind of money either, right? So I digress. Let's get to the defensive line, right? So we have 16 defensive linemen that are coming to training camp with the Commanders this summer. You're looking at about 10 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You're looking at 12 of them. I will show you the other 4. So just for the purposes of context from a year ago, this is what the Commanders did from a roster standpoint. Now, you will notice that one of the names is blatantly obvious to be absent from this list of guys that made the team. We had a very lengthy discussion that was semantics last year about Dante Fowler Jr. being listed as a linebacker last year. I thought it was dumb. We knew he wasn't a linebacker. We didn't even play a lot. Now, look, he stood up at times. So if that's what you want to classify him as, knock yourself out. Sometimes that matters when it's in the case of like Michael Parsons, for instance. The difference between being a linebacker and an edge rusher is massive. If you're a defensive end, the pay is ridiculous. If you're a linebacker, the pay is peanuts. There's a big difference in discrepancy, which is why they created the edge position, right? Well, whatever. We knew Dante Fowler Jr. was an edge. So really, theoretically speaking, they kept 10 defensive linemen last year. This number that you see in front of you, the 9 guys here, was the initial group: Cleveland Farrell, Dorrance Armstrong Jr., Javonte John Baptiste, Jamin Davis, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Jerzon Newton, Fedarian Mathis, John Ridgway III. If you recall, 2 days after this list was put out, which was August 27th, John Ridgway III was traded to the New Orleans Saints. So they actually kept 9, but initially they kept 10, right? So you could look at that either way you want, right? There's a million ways to skin a cat. You could say they kept 9 because they ended up trading John Ridgway. You could say they kept 10 because initially they kept Ridgway. Whatever, right? The number is either 9 or 10. I think the number is either 9 or 10 again this year, right? My guess is it's 9 because I keep talking about trimming off fat somewhere else. The linebacker position was so skimp last year that you didn't have to really divulge any real resources to it. I think we kept 5 linebackers last year, and Dante Fowler Jr. was technically a linebacker, when the rosters came out, but he was a defensive lineman, and we knew that. So they really kept 4. And then remember, when they traded John Ridgway, it opened up a roster spot, and then they went out and got Nick Bellore. So that filled out the roster, and it gave you 5 linebackers. That whole group basically is back minus Mykal Walker. So theoretically, that number could stay at 5, and this number could stay at 9, and everything's all right with the world. We'll see. So in saying that, let's look at the list of defensive linemen. And I think it's going to be pretty easy for us to determine the guys that are going to make this roster. I don't think this is going to be a hard group to narrow down, right? Ricky Barber, undrafted out of UCF this year. Carl Davis, a Dan Quinn favorite from his time in Dallas. Sheldon Day didn't make the roster last year, but played a ton of football for this team. Villamy Fioco Jr., another guy that was with DQ in Dallas, has been here for the entire duration that DQ's been here, essentially. Eddie Goldman brought him in here to help stop the run. Javon Kinlaw given the biggest deal of the offseason, 3 years, $45 million, 30 fully guaranteed. Jerzon Newton, big things expected from him in year 2. Deron Payne, this is a make or break year for him. Again, it feels like he is in a contract year, even though he's technically not. This feels like a contract year. Feels like what Jonathan Allen had going on last year. A lot of good things have been said about Deron thus far this offseason. Now we'll see if we get contract season Deron Payne or not, because as we've laid out, and I think me and John Kime talked about this, shout out to my guy Derek B, because he was one of the first people to really point this out. No matter what Deron Payne does this year, he's not coming back next year on the same number that his contract states next season. They're not bringing Deron Payne back on the 20 whatever million dollar. I think it's like 26 or 27, whatever that number is, because there's really no guarantees in there. Whatever that number is, they're not bringing him back at that number. Either they're going to extend him, make that number lower, or they're going to move on from him and do away with that number altogether for the most part. But there's no way he's coming back at that number. So this is a big year for Deron Payne. Dorrance Armstrong in the second year of a 3-year deal that he signed last year. Cleveland Farrell, a guy that they brought in here on a 1-year deal to help set the edge and the culture. Did a good job of the latter, not so much of the former necessarily, but they brought him back anyway. Jalen Holmes, I thought played really well for us. We picked him up, mid-season, maybe towards the latter third of the season, but I thought he came in and he had an impact. Like him a lot. Javonte John Baptiste, second-year guy that they have high hopes for, and I think I'm selling him short. I haven't seen anything that necessarily moves the needle to make me think that he's going to be some impact player for us. But if he could be a better version of Cleveland Farrell, I'm on board. I'm on board. I just don't know if he's ready to produce that yet. That's all I'm looking for. I'm not looking for this guy to be a 7-sack guy, right? If he could just come in here and produce what Cleveland Farrell gave us last year, then we don't need Cleveland Farrell. That's my thought process. I'm just not sure that he can yet. So because of that, we still need Cleveland Farrell. But if Javonte John Baptiste can take that next step, there's no need for Cleveland Farrell. They're duplicates, if you ask me. And he's younger, and I think a much better fit. But we'll see. As you keep going, Andre Jones Jr. is one of the few holdovers from the last regime. I'm shocked he's still here, to be honest with you. I think just his dimensions of his height, his length, gave him a chance to stick around, but this has got to be it for him, right? I feel like they're going to probably move on from him this year. Like, not even have him around on the practice squad. That's my guess. Jacob Martin, guy that they brought in free agency, that we're hoping gives us some sort of Dante Fowler Jr. relief. Norrell Pollard was an undrafted guy from last year that they really like, that I just keep saying, don't sleep on this guy. Now, he's got to stay healthy. That was the issue last year. But I'm not telling you he's making a roster, but I am telling you he's a guy that could easily stick around as a practice squad player. and eventually weasel his way onto this roster at some point. So, and then Dietrich Wise, one of the bigger, free agent acquisitions on the defensive line this year, along with Javon Kinlaw and Eddie Goldman. So, of this group of 16 guys, let's count them off. We can count off 10 of them, but I think if we had to squeeze it to 9, I think we can do that. Now, again, and I said this about the running back position earlier, that we can sit here and have these conversations about what we think is going to happen, but ultimately training camp and the preseason are going to be the determining factor for those last 2 or 3 spots that may be up for grabs. I don't even know if there are that many. Once we get through this count, we'll see how many spots may be up for grabs and kind of teetering in the balance, right? Dietrich Wise is a lock. That's 1. Jacob Martin is a lock. That's 2. Javonte Jean-Baptiste is a lock. That's, I don't want to call him a lock. That's a little bit extreme. Let me walk that back. I don't see them cutting a draft pick from last year's draft. But we'll come back to him. He's a possible. A lock and a possible. We'll call him. So Dietrich Wise is a lock. Jacob Martin's a lock. That's 2. Dorrance Armstrong's a lock. That's 3. Daron Payne's a lock. That's 4. Johnny Newton's a lock. That's 5. Javon Kinlaw's a lock. That's 6. Eddie Goldman's a lock. That's 7, assuming that he wants to play football. I'm going to assume he wants to play football. That's it, right? So 7 guys feel like a lock. So that makes me comfortable in saying that Javonte Jean-Baptiste is a lock at 8, right? Clelin Ferrell is probably going to be here too. That's 9. I don't think you have to do anything else. What says you, right? I don't think you have to do anything else. I don't think there has to be a 10th guy with this group. You go through it again. Ricky Barber's not making this team. Carl Davis isn't making this team, and he doesn't need to because they can put him on the practice squad. And even if they don't put him on the practice squad, they can cut him, and he'll be available more likely than not if they need to bring him back after the fact. Sheldon Day is a guy that they put on the practice squad last year and was very vital to this team's, I don't want to say success, but he kept us alive when we had injuries along the defensive line. They could do the exact same thing again this year. Vladimir Fehoko Jr. isn't making this football team. Norrell Pollard isn't making his team, and Andre Jones Jr. isn't making his team. So Wise 1, Martin 2, Javonte Jean-Baptiste 3, Jalen Holmes 4, Clelin Ferrell 5, Dorrance Armstrong 6, Daron Payne 7, Johnny Newton 8, Javon Kinlaw 9, Eddie Goldman 10. So when you add in Jalen Holmes, now things get very, very interesting. And this is where I am of the mindset of, if you're trying to keep 9, you don't need Clelin Ferrell. If you believe in Javonte Jean-Baptiste, which I know they do, and again, this is assuming health, right? All it takes is for one of these guys to go down, and now this is a moot point. But if everybody's healthy, and that's what we're going to talk about, we're assuming health. Jalen Holmes' versatility at 283 pounds, which he showcased last year, the ability to play defensive and defensive tackle. Javonte Jean-Baptiste at 6'5", 260, and Clelin Ferrell at 6'4", 265, they're clones. They're doppelgangers. You don't need both of them. You take the younger, cheaper guy, and you move forward. So I could see a world in which Clelin Ferrell doesn't make this team. It's hard for me to envision a world in which Clelin Ferrell doesn't make this team, though. So the number could easily be 10. The number could easily be 9. Are we 1,000% sure that Jacob Martin is making this team? I feel like they've talked up his special teams prowess a bit too much for my liking, especially DQ, right? They talked about how much they like him on special teams. That could be a gift, because if he provides you with something that none of the other guys do, that helps you on special teams, then that could be the way he stays on this roster. It could also be a curse, because if he's not getting to the quarterback and he doesn't offer you value there, what are we really doing here? I think Jacob Martin's on this team though. So again, the training camp and preseason will determine if it's 9 or 10 at this position. Because again, it's not just these guys against one another to make the roster. If there aren't 6 safeties that need to be on this roster, which I think it's only going to be 5, then cool, right? Keep 5. If there doesn't need to be 4 running backs, only 3, cool. And keep 3, right? If this year they decide that we don't need to keep Colson Yankoff, we don't need to keep him. We can cut him, bring him back on the practice squad, and only keep 3 tight ends. Cool. Do it. Right? We'll see. We'll see. Anyway, with that said, now let's talk about how I see this room and how I see this group. And looking at our defensive line room, it's a quick reminder to me that every time I listen to people talk about, I would always laugh when I would be with the Super Friends and LB would talk about how talented our roster was. And I'm like, you're just talking shit. You're talking out the side of your neck, right? When he would bring up how we upgraded, we were one of the most upgraded rosters. Do you know where we started from? Like, what does that even mean? We were the worst roster in football probably last offseason after we gutted we didn't have enough bodies to play games. That's why we had to sign so many guys. Like, it's laughable when you think about the roster that we put on the field last year and what we were able to get out of them. And that, again, is a testament to this staff and their ability to coach up guys, create a brotherhood. And DQ talked about this in his speech at Salisbury University about the best teams that he were on were the ones where guys were together, irregardless of the talent level. And that was absolutely the case last year. We had no business winning 12 games and making it all the way to the NFC Championship game based off the talent that we put on the field. That was Jaden Daniels, a lot of coaching, and a pinch of luck. Okay? And when you look at this roster, we still have another offseason to go before we are among the better rosters in football. I still think that this roster I don't think it's a bottom half of the league roster any longer, but it's right around the middle portion, 15th, 16th in the league overall is what I would probably guess. And maybe I'll be able to make a determining factor after I do all of these positional ranks amongst the NFL, average them together and divide. I'll come up with a ranking of where I think this roster potentially is. And I bet you when it's all said and done, it's going to be somewhere in that 14, 15, 16 range, which is cool. But the 14th best roster isn't one of the best rosters in football. The 15th or 16th best roster isn't one of the best rosters in the football. And this is not one of the best defensive lines in football. Obviously, it wasn't great last year. That's an understatement. They improved it, but we still don't have a premier pass rusher. We still don't know how good we are on the interior of this defensive line. We know we should be able to stop the run, but we got solid guys, right? Deron Payne is solid. Dorrance Armstrong is solid. But, we'll see what Javon Kinlaw is. A lot of people think we overpaid for him. A lot of people think that was a bad move when they assess our offseason. We'll see if they're right or if our staff is right. If AP and DQ and Daryl Tapp are right about Javon Kinlaw. Dietrich Wise, I think, is going to be a really good acquisition to this football team. What is Johnny Newton in year 2? What is Javonte John Baptiste in year 2? Only time will tell. Can Jacob Martin be unlocked? These are all questions that we have. When you look at where this D-line is ranked in the division, if you're being honest with yourself, how can you rank it anywhere but last, dead last in this division? Clearly, they're not better than the Philadelphia Eagles. They're not better than the New York Giants, right? And all the wealth of talent that they have up front in their front seven, specifically along their defensive line. They're not more talented than the Dallas Cowboys defensive line, especially if you look at Micah Parsons. And again, you can call him a linebacker, whatever. The man's rushing a quarterback probably 85, 90% of the time. That's a talented group up front that the Cowboys sport. Just off the strength of Osa Odigizua and Micah Parsons. Just off the strength of those two alone. And they've got plenty of depth. Guys that are very problematic. And they got Dante Fowler Jr. back from us. Not to say that he's going to do what he did with us last year. That was probably an anomaly. But he's depth for them. So I think our line is the worst in the division. And it's a really good group in the NFC East. It's not like this is a bad division up front and we're the worst of the worst, right? But I just think we're fourth, right? They even, exactly, somebody just said Donovan E., right? Donovan Ezaraku was a draft pick. Like, you have to factor that stuff in. The Eagles added the Alabama linebacker, right? The Giants added Abdul Carter. Like, we don't have one of those guys. Everybody else in the division has one. We don't. Now, we don't know what the Alabama linebacker is going to be. We don't know if he's going to be a menace or not. We'll see. Jahad Campbell. We'll see if he's a menace or not. But everybody in the division, the Giants have two guys that can rush the quarterback and an elite defensive tackle. So we're fourth in the division, right? Then you expand the lens to the conference. So you're already fourth just based off of your division, right? Now you start factoring in the rest of the teams in the other three divisions. And I've got the Commanders. Again, remember, there's only 16 teams in the NFC, right? In both conferences, 16 teams, 32 total in the league. I've got the Commanders defensive line 11th in the conference. And that's with an asterisk next to Atlanta and Seattle, right? So the 10 teams I have in front of them, Dallas, Philadelphia, in no particular order. Dallas, Philadelphia, the Giants, Chicago, Detroit, Green Bay, Minnesota, Arizona, Los Angeles Rams, San Francisco 49ers. And the only reason I don't put Atlanta ahead of us is because a lot of their guys are new, right? Jalen Walker, rookie. James Pierce Jr., rookie. We don't know what they're going to do. They added Gumby, but at some point, Gumby's got to run out of gas, right? We're getting to the point now where one of these times he goes somewhere, he's only going to get you 4.5 sacks. Could this be the year? Don't know. But they got talent, though. Do the Atlanta Falcons. They got talent. They got stuff. I'm not willing to put them ahead of our defensive line just yet. Seattle, same thing. They've got talent. They got a lot of young guys. I'm not ready to put them ahead of us. So we're 11th in the conference. Then, again, you widen that lens even further, and you ask yourself, where does this defensive line rank in the entire league? Now you're including all of the AFC teams, and you're already 11th just based off of where your conference is, right? Then you start adding in the AFC teams. Miami's better. New England's better. Cleveland's better. Baltimore's better. Pittsburgh's better. Houston's better. Indianapolis is better. Denver is better. And this is with an asterisk next to Jacksonville, I like their edge rushers. I don't care for any of their defensive tackles, so I couldn't put them ahead of us. Kansas City, obviously, you love Chris Jones. You love the edge rusher out of George Karlaftis. I don't love anyone else necessarily. They did draft a rookie that I am very fond of, but it's still not enough, right? The depth of their group, I think they get the most out of those guys, but I don't love them, right? And the Jets, they got a stud defensive tackle, 2 edge rushers that I would kill to have on this roster, and then nothing else that I really appreciate. So we're 20th in the league defensive line wise, 20th in the league. Again, you can tell me if I'm wrong. Leonard Floyd is Gumby. Leonard Floyd is who I call Gumby. We're 20th in the league defensive line wise. Easily could be 24th if you put Jacksonville, Kansas City, and the Jets ahead of us. Easily could be 24th in the league. Or 23rd, excuse me. So it's not an overly talented group, but can we maximize, which is what we did last year? When you looked at our defensive line last year on paper, it probably was even further back than it is this year. It's probably further back than it was this year. Who knew we were going to get double-digit sacks from Dante Fowler Jr.? Excuse me. We did not know that. We didn't know that that group was going to probably play above their means. Couldn't stop the run consistently, but they did some good things. It's a defensive line that I feel like has a chance to play above this ranking, but until I see it, I don't believe it. If you ask me what position group do I think is going to get the biggest boost next year, and this is where I think that third year of AP being able to continue to shape this roster, that's where you're going to see the biggest leap, is on that defensive line. Because we're getting us a stud rusher next year in some way, shape, or form. We're getting us a young guy that can develop, or we're getting a veteran, but we're getting somebody in here next year. It's probably going to be a young guy via the draft, would be my guess. So, my question to you is, how much of a jump would this defensive line get if you were to add a Zadarius Smith or a Jadeveon Clowney during training camp or the end of the preseason or whatever? How much of a boost would it give this group, if any? I would have to go back and assess how I feel. My guess is it'd probably elevate us over 1 or 2 teams. But that's still a realistic possibility. But we'll see what happens. Anyway, I digress. Let's get to the one super chat I got, and then we'll get out of here. John Perez, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy, JP, thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, JP, writes, Terry needs to be paid, period. Also, the lack of pass rush off the edge scares me. And I finally watched QB on Netflix and got a Debo jersey. So I saw your Debo jersey. I'm going to be honest with you, JP, because you're my guy. So I'm going to keep it a bean with you. I don't know if that was a great purchase or not. I wouldn't have done that if I were you. Just off the strength of he's probably not going to be here past this year. And because I saw the picture you posted on social media, and I was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, if jerseys are an investment, I think the second you hit the purchase button, that thing was like a new car and it depreciated immediately. Now, with that said, if we win the Super Bowl and Deebo Samuel is a beast, and more likely than not, if we win the Super Bowl, he was exactly that, and he's not back, then I still think that jersey holds value because of what he meant to this team returning to glory for the first time in well over 30 years. That said, a guy that's only going to be here potentially for 1 year, and again, who knows? Deebo could kill it this year and they could bring him back on a 2-year contract. The likelihood is he's one and done. Don't know if that was a great purchase or not, but I like it. I like it to be added to the collection. And I haven't watched QB on Netflix because I'm waiting on my wife. I've been tempted a couple of times to fire it up, but I know my wife is not going for that. And I don't want to hear her mouth. It's not worth it. So I'm just going to wait until we have some time and we can dive in. I'm hoping that this weekend, because that feels like something that's, binge worthy. I love that stuff. So we usually run through, 3-4 episodes at a time. It's only probably like 7-8 episodes, I would guess. So I can't wait to watch. I've heard a lot of good things about it, but I already know what the series is. I've watched Receiver. I've watched the first quarterback season, so I already know what to expect. But I expect us to be, in there quite a few times. We play each of the quarterbacks, right? We played each of the quarterbacks team last season, but Kirk wasn't starting when we played them, so I don't know if you're going to see that one on his. Obviously, you're going to see us in Jared Goff's because we ended their season. That was a huge part of their storyline. And I would think you would see us on Cincinnati's. That was a primetime game. They were winless. They probably thought they were going to get their first win against us. I'd like to think that we would be in there for that, but they might have just skipped over it, right? To when they won their first game. So we'll see. I can't wait to watch, though. As far as Terry, he's going to get paid. There's nothing about his situation that worries me, that makes me think he's not going to be paid. I'm really confident in him getting his money in the very near future. This is not a Sam Cosmi situation where they can take their precious time and wait until September. Something's going to get done sooner rather than later. Now, here's something very interesting, JP. And we'll get to your edge rusher comment here in a second. I wonder if Terry would just hold out, or would he come into the building and hold in if the deal isn't done by the 22nd, when veterans have to report? That's a real question, because that's a lot of money. Like, it's one thing to not be in attendance for mandatory minis and fork over $107,000 or whatever the total was for the 3 days of mandatory minis. It's another thing to be getting docked $50,000 a day. Like, that's stupid money. Nobody wants to, donate to the NFL's charity fund. If I'm Terry, I might just show up and do nothing. But then you're already a distraction not being there, because they're going to ask about Terry not being there. You show up, and it's even more of a distraction. This is why this Terry shit has to get done, because we've had damn near a perfect offseason. You can't ask for a better offseason than the one we've turned in to this point. You're getting the draft here in 2027. You're going back to RFK, where you belong. You've got the jerseys that come back, the championship unis as an alt, right? You've got all this positive momentum. You're coming off of a 12-5 season. The first time since 91, you've won more than 10 games in a season. You're coming off of a trip to the NFC Championship game. Once again, first time since 1991. You won a playoff game for the first time since 2005. You've won multiple road playoff games for the first time in franchise history. You got all this momentum. You traded for Deebo Samuel. You traded for Laramie Tunsil. You feel like you've done all these things to put yourself in a position to compete at a high level again. And the last thing you want to do is undercut all of that, undermine all of that by having a distraction, which you haven't had at all this off season. It's all been positive. Every single thing, positive, positive, positive. You don't bring Terry McLaurin back before camp. And now you have a distraction on your hands. And again, I'm not saying that they can't overcome it. I'm not saying that it's going to last very long, but it's avoidable. It should be, at least. I don't know what Terry's agent and Terry are demanding, right? What they're asking for. So I say that not knowing what's actually being asked for. Because again, if they're asking for $37 million, if I'm the Commanders, I'm not doing that either. Sorry, not sorry. I'm not paying Terry McLaurin $37 million per year. Not doing that. I don't think they're asking for that, though. I don't think they're asking for that. So now that we're getting towards that stage where shit's starting to get real, right? Hell, the rookies report in 8 days. Shit's about to get real. We're almost a week away. Next Friday, right? Tomorrow, we will be officially 1 week away from when the rookies report to camp. Shit's getting real now. So I think there are real conversations being had between Terry's camp and the organization. And eventually, as we get closer and closer to that imaginary deadline, which is, July 21st, something will consummate. And he'll be here. Because if you're the Commanders, you really, and again, there's an imaginary deadline. There's really no deadline. But there's an imaginary one. If you're the Commanders, you don't have to do anything, technically speaking, right? Who wants a disgruntled Terry McLaurin? Who wants that? You've built up all this goodwill with the fan base. And again, you shouldn't be making moves to appease the fan base from a roster and a financial standpoint. You can make moves to appease the fan base by going and bringing back nostalgia with the championship unis as an alt. Yeah, you can do that type of shit to appease the fan base. But when it comes to money and roster moves, you should give two shits about what we think. Fans are emotional. If you poll most fans, give Terry whatever he wants. That's not how you operate a business. So again, I understand there's the give and a take. They also understand what Terry means and what him not being here represents. And they don't want to set that precedence if at all possible. But they also, and Adam Peters, if you have not learned anything from Adam Peters in this short 1.5 year span, then you haven't been paying attention. He isn't going to cave in, and he's not going to pay 1 red cent more than what he thinks someone is worth. You saw the deal that Jeremy Chin got. You saw the deal that Dante Fowler Jr. got. We could have paid those guys that very, very underwhelming amount of money. And he put his foot down and he said, this is what I think you're worth. You can either come back for this amount or you cannot. You think I'm bluffing? I'll go sign Will Harris for 2 years, $4 million. See you, Jeremy. Thanks for playing. I'll go sign Jacob Martin, 1 year, $4.5 million. See you, Dante. Or it might have been 1 year, $2.5 million or something like that, I think, for Jacob Martin. Peace, Dante. He's not going to do it. We've seen him play hardball already. Just know this. If Terry and his camp are being rational, a deal will get done. If they're being irrational, I don't know what to tell you, because I can tell you this much. Adam Peters, he's with the shits. As far as edge rusher is concerned, I understand any angst you may have with that particular position, JP. But ultimately, for me, the bottom line is we're going to see what it looks like in camp. We're going to see what it looks like in the preseason. You're not really going to get a tell in the preseason. I don't even know how much of the defense you're really going to see in the preseason. They'll know, right? They'll know. And if they feel like something needs to be done, same thing with safety. Justin Simmons is still sitting out there. And if they're not comfortable with the depth that they have at safety, they'll know. This is the one thing I don't worry about with this group is them burying their head in the sand or them being ignorant or oblivious to shit that's happening on their own team. If they don't think they have enough, they'll do something about it. Right now, they're going to roll with what they have. Because really, nothing that is out there is going to significantly change what we are. Will it make us better? Yeah. How much better? Again, don't know the answer to that. I can tell you right now, Zadarius Smith and 7.5, 8 sacks is probably a lot better than what you're going to get out of any of the other guys that we have minus Dorrance Armstrong on that defensive line. But do you need him? Do you want to pay him? Who are you getting rid of to bring him on? These are all questions. I'd move on from Cleveland Farrell in a heartbeat, but you know that already. I think you could use a guy the likes of a Zadarius Smith or a Jadeveon Clowney on this football team. And maybe they'll get to a point where they realize, yeah, we probably could use one of those guys. Maybe they feel really good. Like they get to camp and damn, Dietrich Wise is playing really well. Jacob Martin looks really good. Man, Javonte John Baptiste is taking a massive step forward. And Javon Kinlaw is everything we thought he was going to be. And then some. And look at Johnny Newton in year 2. My God, look at him go. All of a sudden, you're like, yeah, no, we're good. We're good. Off the edge, we'll see. They're going to continue to use Frankie Louvu. And remember, they talked about looking at other guys, right? They talked about, hey, can Tyler Owens play in coverage? Can Kane Madrano, can he rush the quarterback? Can Jordan McGee rush the quarterback? Like they got guys that they want to see, similar to Jamin Davis last year. And we want to see if Jordan McGee can turn the corner. Can he rush the quarterback? Can Kane Madrano rush the quarterback? We got some guys with some athleticism. Let's see what they can do. Can Dominique Hampton rush the quarterback? Can he do any of that stuff? I doubt it. But they're going to be trying some things. You just never know what you could uncover, right? Anyway. Again, I digress. I really appreciate you, JP. But that was the first and only Super Chat. So that means I am done. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys. I guess next week. But don't fret. I'm going to have some content for you. Probably won't have a summer series episode this week, as the 2 that I had lined up, we weren't able to get on the same page. Got ghosted by one. But I will have one next week for sure. And so I think that will conclude the summer series next week. But then again, I may have some other ones that may pop up. So we'll see. But I'm going to have some content out over the weekend for you guys to consume. So don't worry. I'm going to continue with these Command Core, with this Command Core series. So I'm going to continue to go through all of these position groups because I want to be done with this by the time the rookies report on the 18th. So you're going to be getting these in rapid fire fashion. So of course, if anything happens with Terry McLaurin, you're going to see this face invading your space. But I think the Terry stuff is more likely to occur sometime next week, like the 15th or the 16th or even the 17th. I think you really want to get this done before the rookies report because, again, the messaging there is that, hey, we took care of him before camp. He'll be ready to come in here when all the rest of his teammates roll in here. But again, we'll see. You guys take care. Have a good one. And I look forward to chopping it up with you guys next week. We're getting close. We're going to have our toast to the season next week, more likely than not. Probably next Thursday before the rookies report. If it's not next Thursday, it'll be sometime that weekend, even Monday night, potentially, before the veterans report. But we'll have our toast to the season. It was a good one last year. We're going to do it again this year. So you guys have a good one. Take care. God bless. Good night.